Just imagine, you invade a country, your army commits atrocities. We're talking about rape, burning people alive, destroying cities in spite, burning crops, leveling entire villages. And this sparks an inter-ethnical and inter-religious conflict among the locals, so civilians start to slaughter each other. Now continue imagining, you lose the war badly, really badly. However, instead of paying reparations, your atrocities and the damage you have inflicted on the region you invaded gets forgiven. Because the nation you invaded wants to put history past and wants to move on. Imagine you regret your choices, accept the goodwill, and even nominate the leader of the nation you invaded for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now 100 years later, you would think that both nations get along well. Nope. Instead, your descendants are in full denial of the atrocities you've committed and ask for war like the morons that have learned jack shit. They antagonize the nation you've invaded, they deny your wrongdoings, they pretend to be the victims, they go full force with a victim complex. I present you Greek nationalism. Now 4 disclaimers before I move on with this video. First, I in no form or shape hate Greeks. I believe this nonsense comes from a minority, at least that's what I wish to believe, so in no form or shape should this video be taken as an insult against Greeks or Greece. Second, I'm aware that nationalism can have all kinds of degrees. Again, I wish to believe that this is a minority, so I'm not taking a piss on all Greek nationalists either, even if I will voice it like that. Thirdly, you can have a great contribution to human society, have an impressive history of your nation, and still have a period of time where your ancestors went full apeshit. This does not invalidate the previous times, nor does it invalidate the present. So keep that in mind if you want to defend Greek fascism in the early 20th century. Fourth, in no form or shape am I denying that atrocities were also committed by the Islamic side. People slaughtered each other. However, instead of acknowledging the degenerate side of the people at that time, it always boils down to how the Islamic side is the only side that murdered civilians. It's bullshit. That out of the way, we have to talk about the subject since it takes absolutely ridiculous turns. In hordes, Greek nationalists spread historic revisionism and portray themselves as victims. It's always the same bullshit as well. We did nothing wrong. We're the majority in the area. We're the victims. Turks are converted Greeks. There's obviously much more bullshit than that, but I don't want to make an hour-long video about this. I also don't want to talk about stuff other people have covered by the thousands on YouTube. So to summarize some topics. First, the Greeks were not treated as slaves. You can watch my Ottoman video series about that. Sources are listed there as well. Why am I mentioning this? Because the Greek Revolution was fueled by revisionist ideas about the good old days. You may add that the Ottoman constitution was outdated, but these revolutions come at a period of time where the Ottomans are attempting to establish a constitution equalizing each and every citizen. None of these revolutionaries even remotely came to the conclusion that maybe living in a state as equal citizen is also an option. Does this invalidate the revolution itself or the independence movement, to be more precise? No. Frankly speaking, I might have done the same. I get it where the idea of self-determination comes from. I can respect that. I'm saying this because people can't be honest and try to forcefully create excuses with respect to why a revolution was necessary. It wasn't. The Tanzimat era was a period of time for legislative, progressive movement which was brutalized to a large extent by the revolutionaries themselves. You can read about the progressive social, economic, constitutional and political changes and attempts in the Islamic Enlightenment by Christopher de Belaik. Secondly, Megali Idea. I'm not going to get into this topic, but the Greeks wanted a nation based on borders that were pulled out of their asses. If you look at Ottoman population counts, you will realize very fast that the Greeks are a minority in each and every vilayet. They are not even the majority in bigger cities like Izmir or Istanbul. So maps like these are utter garbage and pure fantasy. But why do these maps even exist? Because again, the revolutions were fueled by revisionist ideas. This is partially stated in Turkey's Forgotten Refugee Crisis by William H. Old. In case of the Bulgarians, this went as far as the Bulgar revolutionaries wanting to purge, quote, all Muslims from Europe. Now, whether the Greeks had similar thoughts, I personally could not find evidence of. But what we do know for a fact is the expulsion of the Cretan Muslims. Why does this matter? Because these people partially if not mainly, were ethnically Greeks and were viewed as Turks and were chased out of their ancestral homes due to their religion. This is very important since it already debunks one brain thought of claiming Anatolian territory because lots of Greeks were converted. It doesn't matter if they were converted or not because they were viewed as Turks by everyone and by all sides either way. Additionally, we do know for a fact that there was a lot of propaganda going on with respect to the perception of the Ottoman Empire and Islam in general. I'm not gonna go into detail here, but here are some examples listed you can look into. It isn't far-fetched to say that the Greeks did not view the Turks as equal, or the Muslims to be more precise, and that their perception was negative. I mean, even today, you have Human Rights Watch criticizing Greece for the denial of the ethnic origin of the Turkish minorities in Western Thrace. To quote, the government's refusal to accept the minorities' Turkish identities has ranged from banning civic organizations bearing the adjective Turkish in their titles to prosecuting individuals who publicly identified the minority as Turkish. Again, prosecution of individuals by the government because they see themselves as Turkish. And this is just one of many points of criticism. The quote-unquote funny part here is, and where the entire brain fart also falls apart, the Muslims on the western Anatolian coast were mainly converted Greeks, according to the Greek nationalists. So the Orthodox Greeks slaughtered the Muslims, which does include the converted Greeks, but the entire invasion was for Greeks. And whenever atrocities were committed by the Muslim side, and atrocities were committed as a reaction to the brutality of the Orthodox side, it wasn't converted Greeks, but definitely ethnic Turks. Do you see how absurd this entire nonsense gets when you bother thinking 2 seconds about it? Anyway, so we have covered the mortars, we have the Megali Idea, the Ottomans lost World War I, and the Greeks completely hard over making their fantasies reality march into Anatolia. According to the Greek nationalists, they didn't do anything wrong and wanted to get along with the Muslims, but evil Muslims just slaughtered Orthodox Greeks out of the blue, even while the Greek army was retreating. This already smells like bullshit and plot twist. It is. I'm not gonna go into detail with respect to the war itself. The Turks kicked the butts of the Greeks lost a war against a numerically inferior army that was undersupplied and invaded from 3 sides. According to Greek nationalists, the Greeks performed great and the Turkish victory is not impressive at all. You know, strong Greek sperm versus weak Turkish sperm. But that is, as mentioned, not the topic. There is a comprehensive summary of all the atrocities committed by both sides on Wikipedia. They start with Turkish victims. The atrocities committed against the Greek side are more of a reaction, which of course doesn't justify the atrocities committed by the Turkish side, but it puts things into perspective. It's very disingenuous when you see Greeks of all people pretending to be victims in a conflict they have escalated and started. Your ancestors invaded Anatolia. It's not the other way around. The Greek atrocities range from rape to burning people alive, to burning crops, to destroying cities, leveling entire villages. Now, of course, some people will just use all of their mental brain power equal to 2 corn chips and come up with the brain thought that this wiki article was probably written by Turks themselves, to which I have to say, the atrocities are well documented. You can read about it in, for instance, Ionian Vision, Greece and Asia Minor by Michael Levilian Smith. To quote, the Greeks landing in May 1919 had seen arbitrary violence, killing and looting in the streets of Izmir as Ottoman Greeks tasting a new and accelerating drought of liberation. During the first day, the Turks suffered 300 to 400 casualties, killed and wounded, and the Greeks about 100. Before long, the killing and looting spread through the town into the surrounding villages. In case this went over the head of some people, the Greek army resulted in the raid, murder, and looting of Izmir and the surrounding area. They did not stop this. However, I already hear people saying how this dude was bought by the Turkish government because reasons. There's also Death and Exile by Justin McCarthy, who is professor for history in the University of Louisville, but of course he's also bought. But hey, the war was definitely for the Greeks, which is why the Greek army slaughtered Greeks and Turks alike. In The Western Question in Greece and Turkey, a study in the Contract of Civilization by Arnold J. Toynbee, it was noted, my witness, who were both at points further north, only heard the sudden fusillade that followed. It is certain that the Greek troops fired promiscuously into the crowd, killing and wounding Christian as well as Muslim civilians. In the same work it is noted, while the Greek commandant Colonel Zafirio appears to have been guilty of culpable negligence in regards to the restoration of order, and the Greek soldiery of somewhat less culpable indulgence towards the Greek crowd, active steps towards stopping the killing and looting were apparently taken from the beginning by individual Greeks. This is very important because it debunks another brain thought that the Greek army was punishing the atrocities committed by the Greek side. This is not the case. It was done, but not by the army itself, but under specific Greeks. This does not translate into the entire army doing this. And plot twist, Talat Pasha also punished the people that were responsible for the atrocities committed against the Armenians in 1915. But you don't hear the same people saying that this wasn't a genocide. How interesting. Smells like bullshit and hypocrisy. But hey, this dude was probably also bought, right? Which is why Arnold J. Toynbee also wrote, accounts from survivors of the atrocities against the Greek minority in Bafra town and district, which were carried out between the 3rd June and 18th, state that the nationalist governor Cemil Bey openly organized the proceeding and that the Turkish regulars and the gendarmerie took as much hand in plundering, raping, killing and burning recruited from the local Muslim civilians. I guess this is also wrong then, or do you want to cherry pick and decide what is right and what isn't? And no, this quote does not mean that the Turkish side did the same as Muslim civilians, but that they did the same as the Greeks. Not the Greek army doing the same as the Turks, but the Turks the same as the Greeks. This is the follow-up to the atrocities committed by the Greek side. This is the passage right before the part I quoted you. Feel free to read it. Again, this does not justify any atrocities committed by the Turkish side, but again, it puts things into perspective. You cannot murder, rape and chase a group of people for decades and blame them for snapping at one point. Blame them to react aggressively and in the same manner as you have and pretend that they were wrong all along. No, you have as much blood and degeneracy on your ancestors' hand, and this entire topic started with Orthodox forces invading the lands of my ancestors. Invading land that was predominantly Islamic. Now I could go on and on and on and on and quote you many more stuff from other works, but I think the point already came across. Instead of further talking, I will just show some additional sources about this topic you may or may not want to look into. The point is, this period of time is well documented. There is no excuse for not knowing what happened or to question certain atrocities committed by one or the other side. It was a bloodbath. People slaughtered each other like animals. One side was blinded by nationalism, the other by rage. None of it is justified and none of it is better than the other side. However, while the Turkish side already forgave all of this without any acknowledgement or reparation, we still have Orthodox nationalists pretending to be victims in this entire ordeal, pretending to be divine innocent angels, when in actuality they are disingenuous, atrocity-denying fascists. Learn your own damn history.